Welcome to Manavavani, the voice of humanism. This is a show and project sponsored by the South Asian Humanist Association and Indian Humanists. I am Babu Gogineni and I am discussing with the celebrity chef Auditya Gunti about food from all different aspects cultural, historical, and the future of food as well. This is episode number 2. In episode 1, we discussed what the early humans might have eaten when they possibly moved towards a non vegetarian diet. What did they cook? How did they cook? Um, did the introduction of meat help the humans, the early humans, the pre humans, evolve? Evolve with their better brains and greater capacities. Whether raw food was eaten then and whether it's eaten still, and how the early humans, before the refrigerator and the freezer came around, how they preserved food. We talked of agriculture, we talked about settling of humans, we talked about domestication of animals, and we talked about some of the vegetables that are the, so to say, daily diet of humans around the world and what their origins were. Potatoes, tomatoes. Oh, but I don't think we spoke about chili. That probably we will do today. Since we started the episode, we realized that 2 episodes would not suffice. So in this series, we are adding one more. And the first one is done, the history of food. Today's second episode, we will look at food around the world. And the third episode is when we shall be looking at food, culture, religion, taboos, misunderstanding, and also quackery around food. Aditya,
Hel-
welcome to the show.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be associated with Manavani, the voice of humanism, and very happy to discuss about food.
It's a delight, but what did you cook yesterday? You work in a restaurant, you head its cooking department, you are the head chef of a major restaurant, six-star restaurant of a major chain. You cater to 4,000 meals. Your team caters to 4,000 meals a day. You make 250 different dishes. What did you cook yesterday?
I love to cook at any given point of the day or any given season, as it is time for many people for their Lunar New Year celebrations. I was working on the Lunar New Year menu. I was cooking some Peking roasted duck. I was cooking some seafood stir fried noodles and many other Asian flavors.
Right. Duck. We don't eat much of duck in India, do we?
Not much, sir. It's in some regional areas where the ducks are domesticated. Yes, they do eat duck. They make some duck curries as well in the Telugu lands. It has got a game flavor to it. But however, in China, duck is very widely used bird, I should say, that they use for all of their ceremonies, festival. It's as common as our chicken.
In China.
Yes, sir.
It seems that poor chicken are eaten all over the world. Chickens are grown, slaughtered by the millions every day, I think.
Yes, sir. Hyderabad is one of the place where you and me come from. Is one of the region where the highest number of chicken are eaten on a daily basis. Because we love our biryanis, especially the chicken biryani that we make in Hyderabadi style, and the tandoori chickens and the chicken 65. We need a lot of chickens for our daily consumption, and it's a good source of protein as well.
Talking of biryani, Aditya, I always had this question. if you make biryani not with chicken, but with just vegetables, can it still be called biryani or does it become pulao?
There is this big discussion between pulao and biryani. If you ask me, the chef, how to determine between two, I should say that the cooking methods are different between pulao and biryani. If you just put some salt, mint leaves, and green peas with the tadka of cumin seeds to rice and boil it, it becomes a pulao. Where in biryani, you layer either the meat or the vegetables or the seafood with the rice and then you cook them together. So
Ah, so that means chicken and lamb are not crucial. It's the method that
it's
you
the method.
use.
Yes, how the rice is cooked with. It's not about what it is cooked with.
Ah, that clarifies a very important question in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We did say Hyderabad is where a lot of chickens are eaten,
Yes,
but India is also considered around the world as a vegetarian nation. Is that true?
and it is understood that is in India has got 80% of vegetarian, but it's actually the reverse. The 80% of Indians are non-vegetarians. There are groups upon their cultures who are following vegetarianism, but the major chunk of Indians enjoy the non-veg in their daily intake of food.
Oh, this is interesting. I think we should perhaps keep that discussion for the third episode.
Definitely, sir.
Uh, it is true. It is also my understanding and knowledge that the majority of Indians are non-vegetarians, but the ones who represented India to the world come from one or two castes, which were the oppressing castes of the past. They were the ones who studied, traveled abroad, spoke English, and their habits were considered by everyone to be the habits of Indians, all Indians.
That's very true, sir.
Um, like I said, we should give this discussion some time in the next episode. Um, so let's come back to what we eat. And of course, we eat a lot of plants and plants products, but we don't eat all parts of plants like we don't eat all parts of animals.
We do, sir, for all the animals from head to tail, everything is used, and also in the plants, we use from roots to the leaves. Roots like carrots and radish are used in many cookeries, almost all the cookeries. Stems like leeks and celery is also used. The bark of the trees like cinnamon we use as a spice. The leaves of plants and trees like lettuce to coriander to bay leaf, we use all of them. We use the flowers of the plants and trees like cauliflower and edible flowers like snapdragon, purple flowers. We use fruits and berries like bananas, pineapples, and strawberries. And I have to tell you an interesting fact here. Strawberries is the only fruit that has got seeds outside. Can you tell me if there any? There is no other vegetable. There is no other fruit which has got seeds outside other than strawberry. And then we
How
all
about cashew?
Um, cashew is also
Cashew fruit has
yes.
its seed outside, is it not?
This is only fruit which has got multiple seeds outside. Maybe other than strawberries,
Hmm.
because cashew fruit, the cashew is the nut. It's not a seed as well. If I'm not wrong, sir.
Yes, it's a fruit which bears its nut on the
Nut.
outside.
Yeah. And then
I was just challenging the strawberry story, that's all.
and then we also use seeds like sunflower seeds and flax seeds in our daily intake. And we also use the tubers, which are the starch storing parts of the plants like potatoes, yams. We use bulbs of plants like onions and garlic. And the Romans believed that the onions has got healing properties for a lot of ailments, which is not true. And then, interestingly, we also use the latex or the gum of the tree, like the rubber. We also use gum, which is called as asafoetida, or also called hing or
Hing.
ingua. in the Telugu language. And Mahayana monks do not consume this asafoetida, thinking that they consider that this asafoetida excite the senses. And we also use the agar. Many people consider agar as a vegetarian gelatin because they don't want to eat animal-based gelling product. So they shift to agar, which is a seaweed-based gelling agent. It can be used for gelling and binding, emulsifying as a helper for all these properties. And it is generally mentioned in the food. If you carefully observe the ingredients of any jellies that you buy, it always mentioned as E406.
Mm-hmm.
So we use all the parts of plants, and also in animals, as I said, we use from right from the head to tail.
Mm. But of course, first thing I have to say, I'm very, very glad you mentioned all these vegetables and stuff, but you did not mention coriander, which I hate.
I did mention,
Um,
sir,
you did.
knowingly that you hate the coriander.
In the
Big
Big
boss,
Boss
yeah.
show that I was in,
Mm.
um, those naughty fellows, they called my home to find out what I don't like, and which was really a family secret. Nobody knew. And whenever I went to any party or when I was invited, I would silently eat it. Never ever tell anyone I don't like it. But at home, it was taboo. And they made me eat a whole bunch, something the quantity of which a buffalo would eat in a day. They made me eat it.
If I ever get an
So,
opportunity, sir, to cook for you and meet you, I will definitely make some coriander dishes for you for sure. Maybe a lemon coriander soup
oh,
for you to start with.
you don't like me.
No, no, you will start loving coriander from then. I will change your perception.
Well, that would be a good idea. Um, but I think not everyone likes everything. For example, would you in India eat a dish made out of the blood of an animal? In Scotland, you would make a pudding out of the blood, sausage,
Yes,
blood sausage.
yes, blood
But I
pudding.
don't know if in India people would feel comfortable with that.
Many of the mainstream cultures in India are not happy to have the blood of the animal, but there are some cultures that I know of who steams the blood, and then when it gets like a kind of solid jelly, they cut into pieces and they make curry with that. I have tried it once. It's not of my great liking, but it's a dish to try once at least.
So where did you actually taste this? In which region or place?
In Andhra Pradesh as well.
Oh, really?
Even they slaughter the animal, they collect the blood in a pot, and then they cook it, they steam it. When it gets set, they cut into pieces and make a curry with that.
Wow. Talking of eating everything that you see that is moving, because humanity eats just about anything. Um, a friend of mine, Edgy Uma Mahesh, is someone who possibly tried everything possible around the globe. He's traveled around the world. He's an enthusiast. He organizes Formula One. He used to organize Formula One in India, and from Azerbaijan to Myanmar into the forests. Anything new to taste, he would be there. So there's a spirit of adventure for many people, tasting food, tasting new food, trying out new things, and so on. So I was wondering, is there anything at all that
Yeah.
humans don't eat?
Uh, Humans not only eat vegetation meats and seafood, we also eat fungus. You rightly heard, we also eat fungus, like
Now, when
mushroom.
you say fungus, what appears on your food when you don't take care of it, do not put it in the fridge in 4 or 5 days? That kind of fungus?
Same family of fungus, but these are the spore-bearing fruiting bodies of a fungus, like mushrooms and truffles. And we,
Mm,
in many
so,
cuisines, yes, in many cuisines, many varieties of mushrooms like portobello, champignon, oyster mushrooms, shiitake, enoki, porcini, especially like porcini in Italy, are very very well known for its well balancing with the pastas that they make over there. Not all mushrooms are edible. There are also a few poisonous mushrooms, so just be careful what kind of mushrooms are you collecting. And all mushrooms are fungi, but not all fungi are mushrooms. And then
yes, we do hear news coming from, usually from China, that people went on a mushroom picking excursion and they found this brightly colored mushroom and they bring it home, cook it, eat it, and die. A lot of these colored mushrooms are known to be
they look very
very
attractive. The poisonous mushrooms look very attractive. They look like similar to the mushrooms that are edible, but they are not. You need expert advice to know and understand what mushrooms are edible and what mushrooms are not. As you said, thing about China, there's also a joke saying that Chinese eat all the animals which has they eat all the things that has got four legs for it except for the tables and chairs. That is really a fact because Chinese do eat a lot of animals and birds. There is no hesitation for them to try any of the animals or the birds or the foods. And then after the mushrooms, there's also the family of fungi also has got truffles. Truffles are not so common in India, and many of the regular people would not know or not would have not seen a truffle ever. A truffle is a um, rough surfaced, irregular shaped, pungent, earthy flavor, uh, earthy flavor fungus that's found in very particular regions where there is a right amount of moisture and climate. And it is for the climate that we have in India, I doubt that there is any truffle production or farming. But in countries like Italy, France, and Australia is emerging as a new truffle producing country as well. So the truffles are very unique in flavor. It's very hard to explain or describe how it smells or how it tastes. But first time you might hesitate for its flavor, but once you start enjoying it, it's a real delicacy. And then the Greeks had a superstition that this truffle has got supernatural powers and they have healing capacities, which is not correct. And the medieval church outlawed the truffle, saying that their pungent aroma is devil's work. So all these religions, when they don't know of anything, they try to explain things with supernatural or saying that it's a devil's work or it is forbidden from the God or it is said not to have by our prophet or by our books. However, after that, all the cuisines have adopted this, and today the truffles are so expensive that 1 gram of truffle, I'm talking about just 1 gram of truffle shaving onto your food at a good restaurant, will cost anywhere from $5 to $10, which is 250 to 500 rupees. And if it is a white truffle, it would be more expensive than that. But as a chef, I'm very happy, glad that I had opportunity to work with 5 kg truffles at one time, which are
Oh,
from
really?
yeah, which are from Manjimup, Western Australia. So these are farm truffles. So these are farm truffles, and I have to tell you that these truffles are not dig from the earth by humans. They take the help of
By pigs.
yes, by pigs, and pigs started to dig because they have that too female pigs has got the capacity to smell the truffles. because they have got a kind of rotten smell, a gas, garlic smell to it. And the problem with these pigs hunting these truffles are the pigs used to hunt and quickly eat the truffle as well. So
Oh,
to to stop this uh, cost for the farmers have come up with training the dogs for this. So the dogs would just do the same job as pigs, but they would not eat them. And
hmm.
then when I work with these truffles, I have infused them in different cuisines to make different dishes, from truffle risotto to truffle malai tikka to truffle naan, from truffle panna cotta to truffle ice cream. So I'm very glad to work with that much volumes of truffles. I'm sure not many people would have got that opportunity as a chef.
This is extraordinary. And, talking of mushrooms, we also hear about magic mushrooms, don't we? Around the world, historically, people have eaten mushrooms that give them a high, like a drug, psychedelic. So there are mushrooms that make you ecstatic because of what they do to your tongue and to your nose. Then there are mushrooms that kill you, and between these two are mushrooms that take your brain somewhere else.
Also with this, many people associate food like oysters and chocolate and honey with aphrodisiac properties. But no, it does not have any of those properties. It is just a myth. Even pistachio also, they think it has got aphrodisiac properties. But scientifically, all of these have never been proved, and they have no evidence that it will stimulate the human sex organs.
Hmm. Because a lot of that belongs to the mind, not to the food.
Yes, it's kind of your placebo effect that you explained in many times in many situations.
Hmm. There is also this idea that it's people who ate mushrooms and people who ate wild berries who started hallucinating, and they are the ones who dreamt up some of the myths and mythologies because they get these extraordinary visions when they do that. And there is some speculation that perhaps it's mushrooms and some wild berries which are at the origin of what people in ancient Indian geography were calling somarasa,
Hmm.
that which transported you to a different plane of consciousness, so to say, or the lack of it. Now, but again, that'll be anticipating the third episode.
Yeah.
But you've done so much of cooking and so many different experiences you have gathered under your chef's hat. Tell us a few things that might be interesting for common people who only just eat food, love it, but have no concept or idea of history, origins, and things like that. In the first episode, I was telling you, I got fascinated by food, not just because of the taste of my mother's cooking, but also because I read Malati Chandur's
Yes.
Vantalu Pindi Vantalu book in Telugu. And while you were reading the book, just like when as a kid people read Enid Blyton and start imagining the taste, almost feeling it by simply reading the words. I felt that way when I read in Telugu Malati Chandur. There's a lot to food than simply its taste and its preparation. Food comes to us with all its flavors, tastes, also with its own special history. Have you always been eating the food that we eat now? Have they changed? Are the habits that we have today recent habits? Obviously, most people here in Australia or now increasingly in countries like India When they want a quick meal, they head to a fast food joint. But these are recent, isn't it? They're less than 150 years old. What were
The,
people eating earlier? When they wanted a quick meal, what did they do?
that's right, sir. Now the sandwich is very a fashion now for many of us to have it for lunch. It's a multi-billion-dollar revenue generating food throughout the world today. Most of the Europe, America has a sandwich for lunch, but the sandwich, how it was started was, I have to tell you a story of John Montagu, who is the fourth Earl of Sandwich. He's a British statesman who overlooks the military and the political operations. um, there are two stories to him. They said that he was busy at his table. One table was being at a casino table, the other one was at his military operations table. Whatever the story
He was a
that
gambler.
he was a gambler. So there are two stories to him, saying that he was busy at his desk. I leave that upon to everyone how what story they would want to pick, whether he was at the military desk busy or he was just gambling. So he wants to have a quick meal on his table. So what he asked the cook was to put a cooked piece of meat between two breads and bring it, so he could hold it with one hand, work alongside having his food. So it was a comfort, easy, and also does not need to move from his table. So it was a bit of comfort for him. That is where it all started, is the stories that I generally hear around the sandwich. But today, there are many worldwide competitions of the best sandwich, and they pay you $1 million if you win. Maybe next it's worth to try next time.
Wow, that certainly is a gamble. Um, but you mentioned bread, did you not?
Yes, sir.
Now, we take bread for granted. Um, and only when I first met some Europeans did I realize that they say chapati is Indian bread. For me, bread simply meant modern bread. And when somebody at home is not well, you go to the kirana shop and get bread because it's easy to digest. This is what I thought bread was as I was growing up, not exposed to world cuisine. Then I realized that the naans that we eat, the rotis that we eat, the chapatis that we make, all of this is really bread. But the ones we are talking of is the one that is leavened with yeast, and then it fluffs up and so on. Then I realized, looking into the history of it, that bread was already being made by human beings 8, 10,000 years ago in Egypt mainly. So they got the grain and they crushed it and they were grinding it. And with that, they made what was possibly like our chapati or the tortilla of the Mexicans. And then I guess they learned how to use yeast, which then helped them make it even more interesting. But that tells us something, doesn't it? That if they were playing around with grains 10,000 years ago, the grains were around much longer. The staple for the world is really the product of grass, rice, and wheat. And we now know that rice, most likely in the China region, was already being grown 14, 15,000 years ago. So they had rice, and then came wheat, and then came beer from the wheat. And those things stay on with us. The bread you're talking of is the baker's bread, the one which is leavened with yeast. And then they put pieces of meat and relish and stuff like that. Occasionally, a leaf of lettuce, and they eat it while they are doing other things. So that's the story of the sandwich then.
Yes, sir. You have mentioned so much about bread, from tortilla to naan bread to baguette from France. As a language teacher, I would also want to ask the question. I know in France it's called a pan as bread. What is this a pan? What is the relation between a colleague and a bread?
Sorry, between what and bread?
Between a friend and a bread in France.
Okay. All right, I see your question. Pain, P-A-I-N. If you know only English, you would read it as pain, but it is, but it is pain. And a typical French man is identified by someone who, at 6 or 7 in the morning, goes out to the local bakery and takes some milk and buys a baguette. A baguette is a long bread, it's like a stick, thick stick. And the typical image of a French man in the 1940s, 50s, 60s was the interesting cap that the French wear, a baguette being held by the person, and some milk perhaps, and walking back from the bakery to go and consume something, where of course they would have all of this with cafe, coffee. Now, pain is bread. In the Christian tradition, when you eat food with someone, you say, let's break bread with this person, which means you hold the bread and you tear it into two and you share it. Now, somebody who you do it with is co. So a copain is someone you break bread with, someone you share a meal with, someone you spend time with. So that's the connection between pain and copain.
So I'm your co-pan for today.
Yes.
I'm glad, sir.
So when we talk about the origins of food, then we are obviously, as I just mentioned, looking at the staple of our diets, and grains have been the main thing. And then there is what we discussed briefly last time. There's potato, which is also the staple for many people. And using a combination of all of these, knowing how to ferment things, people also started making beer and wine and cheese. And I know that in France, Switzerland, you can get cheese which has fungus growing on it. I mean, actual, real.
The molds on the cheese.
Exactly.
Yeah,
What you would, if you were brought up in India, what you would look at with some disgust
the
as
delicacy.
food that is spoilt. It smells harsh and acrid at times, pungent always. And there are different levels of intensity of the cheese. But if you eat it for a week, then you're hooked on to it for life. That's my experience with Stilton and all the blue cheese that people stay away from.
The blue cheese like Gorgonzola and Roquefort from England. Gorgonzola is from Italy and Roquefort from England, and then Stilton. All these blue cheese, they get these bluish green veins throughout the cheese because these cheese are injected with a penicillium bacteria. So when the cheese matures, this bacteria grows along with the cheese and it gives a distinct flavor. Again, it's not a pleasant flavor if you have to have it first, but if you get used to it, it's a very pleasing flavor. It's very good when you make a cheese sauce. It's very pungent. It goes well with any of the pastas that you make. If you can bake any gnocchi with that, It'll be amazing. My mouth is already watering now.
I love cheese too. But I must tell you, in Europe, you would get into trouble for saying Roquefort is from England. It could be that
France.
you ate Roquefort that was made in England, but no longer is it allowed to be called so because with all this geographical
Index.
naming of food based on their origins, Roquefort is from France. Just like Champagne is from France. And if you make the same thing in Australia, you can call it Australian sparkling wine,
Yeah.
but you can't call it Champagne from Australia.
You're right, sir.
And actually, that reminds me, in Maharashtra, this is very surprising for many. In Maharashtra, there is, because there's a lot of grapes being grown there, the vineyards have developed, and Maharashtra makes some what
Shiraz.
they used to call Indian champagne. And then they went to court in France and they filed a case in India and they said the wine that is produced in India cannot be called champagne because in France itself, if you are not growing it and making it in the region of Champagne, across the road also, you cannot call it champagne. Like biryani, I think they are talking about getting some kind of geographical rights on it. But that's a bit silly because biryani was not invented by Hyderabadis or Indians. It really comes from Iran.
I very well said, sir. Whatever you explained about the cheese and champagne. There's also a similar thing about parmesan. So you can't call any cheese that's produced out of the Parma region. And then coming to the biryani, I also came across a very interesting story in a book. Um, it says that the biryani would have been introduced to India by the rulers who came from Persia, from Middle East. When they were coming to India, they had this huge army to feed, and a simple dish that they could make with less of water, less of work, but it's a complete meal together with carbohydrates, protein, fat, is a biryani. So they could keep this biryani as layers and leave underneath the ground. They dig a hole and put it underneath the ground, the vessel, and then put charcoal on top. Leave it in the morning. Go for your war, and when you come back by evening, the flavors are trapped in the pot, and the soldiers had got a good meal at the evening after going for a whole full day war. And when it came to India toward the south, the addition of the yogurt is introduced to the biryani is a story I have heard.
Oh, so that means in Iran, in Persia, or in northern parts of the world, of India, originally there was no yogurt being used with the biryani.
Yes, that's one of the belief.
How interesting. Because we wouldn't in South India eat biryani without some raita being served along with that.
That's right, sir. You also mentioned
But
You also
yes,
mentioned the Hyderabadi dish, yes, in the last episode about Pattarka goes and its relation with the early pre-human history. I did some research about Pattarka goes and I've come up with an story again that it says that in the 19th century, Nizam Asaf Jahi Sikhs, who used to go frequently to the hunting, uh, and then one time he also went for hunting as his regular hobby, and then his royal cook forgot to get skewers and the griddle. And
mm,
after the Nizam had got some animal, there is nothing to cook. So the clever cook, just to get away from the Nizam's anger, he used a flat granite stone as a tawa or a hot plate or a griddle, and then he cut the meat into thinly sliced pieces and then marinated with spices and cooked on the hot flat granite. And the Nizam liked it. And then from the forest, it went to the royal kitchens of Nizam, and then it was made many times in the royal kitchens. That is how it was introduced to Hyderabad, and till today, everyone enjoys this Pattarga ghost. When I in my days in Hyderabad, every late night I used to hunt for this Pattarga ghost just before I'm having a biryani.
How interesting. So someone forgot something, and instead of being skewered, he offered a new dish to the world.
Mm.
Um, Tell us about other foods that came to India. I mean, biryani, which we associate with ourselves so much, is really now known, comes from somewhere else. Chilies that we eat, there is a little bit of confusion about their origins, but we largely are in the impression that chilies come from the Americas, especially South America. Um, what else came from outside India and which is now associated so closely with Indian uh,
Tomatoes,
culinary habits?
tomatoes, as we discussed in last episode, is also outside of the India. The exotic fruits are from India, but other than these non-exotic fruits that non-tropical fruits, many of these fruits and berries have come from the other parts of the world. Many of the spices, other than peppercorn, cinnamon, there are spices like saffron, which have come to India from Iran. After the globalization, even though even though the origin of a vegetable or a fruit or an ingredient or a spice have been to associated with any specific country, in modern days everything is grown everywhere.
Mm. I was also thinking about dishes that may have come to India
Oh,
from elsewhere. I mean, as Telugu people, South Indians, Tamilians, most mornings start with an idli. And then I understood that the idli is not Indian.
many of South Indians could be very upset to understand that idli might have
They would
not.
be angry with us. They would even call us anti-national.
But I'm sorry, I have to say the facts. As a humanist, rationalist, and atheist, we only speak facts. And I have to say, it might not be the origin of South India because in the scripts of Indonesian culture, we have evidences of the idli being cooked in the royal kitchens of Indonesia. Uh, as there were some Hindu cooks under the Hindu rulers over there, this dish would
You
have
mean when the South Indians colonized areas of Indonesia, when the
definitely,
kings
sir.
from here went to Cambodia, conquered and occupied and ruled those regions? That's the time you're referring to.
Absolutely, that's the time, sir. So it would have been again two cases. Maybe a rough recipe of idli would have traveled from India to Indonesia, and then where it got developed into a smooth, fluffy, light-weighted white idlis, and then it's introduced back to India, and then we enjoyed. An average South Indian on a daily basis will definitely have idli as his breakfast. And then to this idlis, there are many varieties. I'm not speaking about rava idli or carrot idli or spinach idli. I'm talking about the variations of the idlis. If you see the Goan cuisine, they have a similar kind of idlis which are steamed, which are leavened, which are called as sanas, and they add toddy to the idli batter. How good it is to
Toddy,
start? Yes. How good it is to yes.
alcohol. Okay.
Yes.
What a way to start.
What a way to start your day. And then idlis are generally made with the black gram, but the same concept of making a batter and then steaming them, having a fluffy product, is also seen in Gujarati doklas as well.
Mm, all right. So there is more to idli than simply its origin. The method may have existed across cultures.
Yes, sir, and that's true. And then the culinary knowledge exchange between India and Indonesia would have led to the modern idlis.
Mm. So somewhere about 1,000 years ago, rulers from India who colonized parts of Southeast Asia had their cooks, and their cooks learned some of these methods, brought them back to India, and that became part of our food. I can think of one dish and one method which is very famous in the United Kingdom. Um, People talk about Balti cuisine.
Yeah.
Balti is really invented in Birmingham, in the United Kingdom, and chicken tikka masala, which I don't mean any disrespect, but the English have no real cuisine of their own. So one good thing is that people from South Asia are there to fill that gap, and some very good food is actually supplied in the United Kingdom by people who give Pakistani, Afghan, Indian, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan cuisine to the general public. Of course, along with Chinese, Vietnamese, and a huge number of culinary contributions from different parts of the Commonwealth. But chicken tikka masala, one of the most famous of, or probably the most famous British meal today, apart from fish and chips, was invented not in India or Pakistan. It was invented in the United Kingdom. And
Hmm.
again, just like the guy who got in Patthar Ka Gosht, the chef forgot some things, couldn't lay his hands on other stuff. So whatever he had within his reach, he put into a dish that caught on like wildfire. So sometimes cuisine is accidental, sometimes somebody else's cuisine becomes your own to the extent your identity is defined by that. But
Well
one
said,
thing
sir.
for sure, wherever we go, Indians, we will say, where is the spice and where is the chili? Why is there not enough chili in this food? We're always hunting for that extra bite to the tongue, aren't we?
Yes, sir. The tingling taste of the radiant heat from a chili is very important for the Indians, and especially to South Indians. I understand when the food at my home is spicy, means that my mom is angry for the day. to 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 understand the radiant heat of a chili, there is a scale called a Scoville scale, and the units to measure this spiciness of the chilies are called Scoville heat units. So this is the measurement of the spiciness, which means the concentration of capsaicin, which is the chemical that is responsible for the spiciness or the tingle on your tongue when you eat it. There are many chilies in the world year after year which compete to be on the top of the Scoville's scale. The Bhut Jolokia from Northeast had been it had been the spiciest chili in the last decade, but and it has also been in Guinness Book. However, from thereafter, there are again more chilies produced in other parts of the world with higher capacity of capsaicin in it. Currently, the Carolina Reaper chili has got 1.5 million Scoville heat units. If I have to compare the regular jalapeno peppers, what you eat in our sandwich and burgers is just 2,500 Scoville heat units. So imagine 2,500 Scoville heat units to 1.5 million SHU. It would be
I,
madness. A
I
face
have
would go red.
I have a personal story there. Of course, what you mentioned, um, how hot is a dish, how hot is something, how spicy is something, is what you are saying is measured by the Scoville scale.
Scale.
So the Scoville scale will put jalapeno between 2,500 and 5,000, whereas the
Carolina,
California Reaper would be something like 150,000, no, 15
150,
lakhs.
yeah, 15.
100. So it is 1.5 million. 15 lakhs is the measure of that
Yes,
chili.
yes,
The regular chili we eat would be at most 10,000,
yes,
and this is 15 lakhs.
yes. And
Now,
anything beyond this would become a pure capsaicin, a complete
yes,
capsaicin.
but that is where I'd like to tell a story. Here in Australia, in Canberra, I went to the Floriade,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a shop saying hottest chili sauce made in Australia available here now. And I said, as a self-respecting South Indian, I should try it. So I went there and I said I'd like to try it. And he said, the shopkeeper said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "This is 3 million because this is,"
Hmm.
they said, "on steroids. They do something else. I don't know, pour acid. I don't know what else they do. But 3 million is the score they had evaluated it to be." And he said, "Would you like to try it? Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes." And he took something like a waffle and he put one drop, a medium sized drop of this. And he said, "Now eat it." And actually, I did. Rated at 3 million. It was really very, very painful. There was no real taste to it.
Yeah.
And artificially, from 1.5 million, they doubled its potency, so to say. So it was like, if I were to explain my experience, it was like, a broken piece of glass if you swallowed it
Mm.
and it went down your gut.
Tearing, feeling like
Same
tearing things.
kind of pain, searing pain, like a needle that is going through
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
your throat. It is not tasty. It is just a painful experience. But this guy said, now you have to sit down and then you will start sweating and you'll feel bad and stuff like that. Nothing happened to me. So he was very surprised.
Maybe used to
That
so much of capsicum in Indian cuisine.
possibly,
Yeah.
possibly, but there's no connection between 10,000 and 30 lakhs,
Yes.
3 million. Uh, then he admitted me in Australia's VIP club of those who managed to eat this. So I have a certificate to prove that I can eat this.
While you speak about your story, it also reminds me. I took my mom to a Korean restaurant, and we had a Korean dish called as buldak. It's a chicken dish that's got high spice in it, with red chilies and plum sauce. It's a very spicy dish. So after
Mm.
tasting this food, my mom was sweating. It was so spicy, and then she told me that maybe this is the reason why Kim Jong Un is so bad like that. That is why he gets angry on everyone.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Though I'm
It's a
sure he
good
did it
comment.
just for fun.
Yes.
There are lots of all these internet idiots sending around messages saying if you eat non-vegetarian food, you'll become cruel, and then if you eat vegetarian food, that is sattvic, and you'll become nice and gentle. To think that those who put 1/4 of all of Indian society into the category of untouchables were vegetarian should disprove this claim. To look at Hitler, who was a vegetarian, and to see what all he did is proof that it's not your food that decides your character.
That's right, sir. In a culture, in a known culture, they also believe that if you eat pork, you will have the qualities of a pig.
How stupid can that be? And it's not a pig saying it.
It's not a pig saying it. So it's funny things that people associate with food, and we will discuss all of these things in the episode two, in the coming episode three.
Absolutely. I'm actually thinking, Aditya, this is going to be an unending series. I think we have touched on half the things I wanted to about world food. Let's rethink this. Are we doing it as 3 episodes or four?
There is no end for it. It's like a French cuisine, one after the one. The dish comes on from hors d'oeuvres, pours on potage until the last dessert.
Yes, that's true. This is a multi-course meal that we are having, talking about food.
True, sir.
So we've come to the towards the end of today's episode. We were also going to talk about a few other things, which perhaps have to be for the next time. And we wanted to address the question of coffee and tea and wine and beer,
Mhm.
um, things that are part of most people's food, their origins and how they're appreciated around the world. So I'm really looking forward to the next episode. Please come with all your knowledge and your information, which I am sure is of great interest to our listeners of Manavavani, the voice of humanism, because we want to look at all this from a humanist perspective, from the perspective of the human, not God said eat this, God said do not eat that, this prophet did not agree, that rishi did not permit, and so on and so forth. Human health, environmental consciousness, a sense of responsibility to nature and to ourselves should be the guide to our food. And there must be a way of looking at food which is not entirely food is medicine or food is poison or God said eat it or God said don't eat it. There must be a humanist way of looking at it. Thank you for your contribution to that, Aditya. I look forward to the next episode now.
Thank you, sir. I can't wait either. Looking forward. Thanks for the opportunity to be the part of Manavani, the voice of humanism, and time to spend with you over internet. My pleasure, sir.
Wonderful, Aditya. Let's make it 4 episodes.
Thank you, sir. Bye for now.